What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? I'm Mr. Rad. This is the moment you guys have all been waiting for. We're finally going to rotary swap my 1977 Dodge Colt rally car. So at the beginning of the year, y'all saw us put this thing together. It had a 2.0 liter 4G52 4-cylinder Mitsubishi engine in it. That's what came in this car. If you go watch the last video, which I highly recommend you do, we took home the Ken Block Flat Out Forever Award because we had the utmost amount of destruction at Ojibwe Forest Rally. Radiator exploded, lost the oil drain plug, then the motor locked up. We changed the engine to the backup engine, put that one in there. Transmission clutch mishap, had to swap the trans out to the backup trans because some weird stuff. Anyways, we won that award, but the car is effectively in shambles right now, and we could take it easy and just put the backup engine back in the car and have a turd of a 4-cylinder in here, or we do what I've wanted to do for the entirety of, the rally season, and eventually was going to be, we put a rotary engine in the car. So I feel like in true Ken Block, risk everything, go fast, and be creative fashion, that since we've already got our non-novice competitor license, so we don't have to run in a slow class anymore, Calvin and I have skills now in rally, is we put a rotary in and we go for open two-wheel drive because our limited two-wheel drive championship hopes have since went out the window. So literally the day we got back from the rally, I ripped the engine out, I stabbed this old 12A in here, and this is the full Bridgeport 12A that used to be in my street car called the Mouse. So this is my very first RX-7. I've had it for 10 years. It's still sitting out there on blocks, just rusting. We built the RX-7 to replace it, which is a much cooler car with a cooler story, even though it's not my first one. And in doing so, I stepped away from NA rotary life and went turbo. Well, the Mouse was a running car when I took it apart, which is a common occurrence here. And this is the full bridge 12A, Weber 50mm side draft. I started with a Series 5 FC transmission in hopes that the better gear ratios and stuff, but then the shifter's in the wrong spot. So we're going to dive into all of that in this video, getting the rotary engine mounted in this video. Literally it only takes 2 wires to start this thing, but one of the key things that I need to accomplish before Over Mountain Rally in literally 15 days or 10 days or so when we have to leave is that I need to have a custom drive shaft made. So I need to get this engine sitting where it wants to be so I can measure for a drive shaft, take the Dodge Colt drive shaft and an RX-7 drive shaft to the drive shaft shop, have them combined at the right length to then be able to run the 5-speed 12A, full bridge, gnarly braps. We gotta have it. I've got an old SA 5-speed I'm gonna stick on this deal real quick, and we will put this thing back in here, and then I'm gonna play musical cars and get this to where the RX-8 is so I can sit it on jack stands and then jack stand the engine where I need it so I can build the mounts. This thing on the lift, it's nice for a few parts of it, but ultimately easier if it's just sitting on the ground. Y'all are gonna laugh at me because of this comment, but I'm gonna put it in here because I feel obligated to. Had a comment on one of the last video, my sister drove my car, that, hey, how your all-American tuners, they don't do a good job and the cars never start. Well, here you go. I'm either going to make a fool of myself or the fact that I spent 2 hours working on startup tunes for the RX-7. No throttle. See? My foot is off the throttle, guys, and it's just started itself. So, to that one comment, there you go. I fixed it. Tuned correctly. And you can see it's 78 degrees. The car was not warmed up. Okay, look, I can even turn it back off and turn it back on. No throttle. Fires right up, guys. Fixed it. See guys, that's the sound that the rotary Dodge Colt makes. Honestly, I should have washed that before I just brought it in here to make a whole bunch of, you know, stuff happen with building cool engines for it and whatnot. I'm going to give y'all a real quick RX-7 transmission lesson here. On your left is a 1979 RX-7 transmission. So this is an SA 5-speed transmission. This would have came in your 78 to 80 Mazda RX-7s. Now, on the right is a Series 5 FC RX-7 transmission. So this one came in a 1989 to 1991 in a RX-7 5-speed. So you can see a little bit that they're different. The main difference is the shifter location on an SA is further forward than the shifter location on the later model RX-7. So for those of you out there who just have an FB RX-7, the one that's in the middle of what's been mentioned here, this transmission, your FC 5-speed, will bolt in to an FB RX-7. The shifter is in the same place. In 1981, they changed that with the new dash and stuff like that. So the SA stuff is this. Now the Colt is going to want the shifter to be further forward. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the SA 5-speed. But what you can do is we can take the tail housing off of this SA 5-speed. So effectively from right here back, swap the shifter rod, and I could run this tail housing setup on this later model RX-7 5-speed transmission. And then this 5-speed would bolt in. So if you hop on like Mazda Trix's website or on the RX-7 Club forums, you can find the gear ratios for all of this stuff. The FC transmission will be just a little bit better suited as far as like handling higher RPM shifts. It's got some upgraded like synchronizers compared to the older one. The gear ratios are just a little bit closer together, but we'll do that eventually. But for now, easier just run the 5-speed. So I'm gonna put that on. We'll get this set back in the car and see how much I need to cut out of this deal. All over the place. Oh, there's oil in the transmission. No, 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 no. Stop, 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 stop. Okay. I made a mess. Note to self, change transmission oil. That looks terrible. Shifter turret lined up in the right spot. Engine and transmission tilted forward enough such that I'm running into, you know, my clutch slave cylinders hitting the top of the firewall right here. Ultimately, if you ever look at a first-gen RX-7, the trans tunnel is ginormous, so there's plenty of space inside of a first-gen RX-7. Like, I can take an RX-8 6-speed, which is a giant transmission, and just stick it in an RX-7. Mint. Works perfect. So, crawling under the car, you can see here that the transmission needs to tip up in order to be, you know, somewhat even close to level. And with where the K member is up there, you know, I can't just lower the front to clear this. And with this being a rally car, I really don't want anything hanging down low. So I'm really thinking that, you know, I'm going to have to chop pretty much the whole transmission tunnel out of this car, which really sucks. So it's a little dark, but you can see here, this is the output shaft of the transmission. It honestly needs to be, you know, 4 inches higher. Welcome to the darkness under the car. Y'all saw we've got the engine stabbed in here with the transmission. I had to cut the trans tunnel. Not a big deal. Rather just cut the whole thing out than try to like make it work with just a small hole. So here's where we got to figure out our driveline angle. So I've got 6 degrees down on the transmission. My axle is sitting right at 3 degrees up. You want those to be within half a degree to basically not have any driveline vibrations or anything. So i.e. the pinion points at the same angle as the trans and the drive shaft is in the middle, plus or minus a half. Now, I have some adjustment in the ability to angle my rear end. Okay, so what that means is I can probably get that angle a little steeper. This is, you know, leaf springs, so the angle of the pinion is going to change as we go through the travel. So I've got the rear end jacked up, we're looking at it at ride height. So I've got an RX-7 drive shaft to make sure where this drive shaft is, it isn't going to contact the frame, and then ultimately we've got to measure how long of a new drive shaft we need. We officially have a rotary swapped Dodge Colt because the engine is freely mounted inside the car, albeit we still have a ton of work to do. Engine mount right here. I plated the frame with some 1/8 inch steel, welded that in all the way around. I've got some nice beefy like 3/16 just angle iron I had laying around that I welded into the frame as well. This is some thicker than 1/8 inch wall, but I forget what it is. I had it laying around here. It's super heavy duty. It's a pain in the butt to bend. This right here, I made a little front motor plate for this deal. Stoked, cut that on the plasma. Pumped for that. Basically, these are like bell housing size bolts, so they're 14 millimeter heads. I think it's like a 10 mil diameter bolt, and that's what's going to hold the main engine in here. So now that the engine is, you know, mounted to the frame and not the K member, should we crash the car, we can take the suspension out and the engine stays in. Whereas like most cars, my RX7 included, you know, the RX8 over here, if you crash the car and you got to swap the subframe for some reason, and that didn't, you know, just end your day completely and a subframe change would get you back out there, then you don't have to support the engine up to take the subframe out. So I'm pretty pumped. I actually really like that. A lot of the drag race guys run like a motor plate, like a front or a mid-mount motor plate or both, and those will be tied to their frame rails. So the suspension will be completely separate from that. So it's kind of where I've taken some of that from. A few other notable things to show you. I left my battery in here so I could turn the cargo lights on so that y'all could see, you know, good YouTube guy right here showing y'all with proper lighting. Just can't let, you know, this main positive wire like touch anything. Check out my Motec right here. Motec, good oil pressure, voltage, RPM at 11,000. Basically, the Holley Pro Dash quit working like some time ago at Olympus Rally or whenever it was. I think it was Olympus. So that was a good while ago. We had to run Oregon Trail with no gauges, which was fine. And then when I got back here for Southern Ohio, I threw in just a tack, oil temperature, and I've got a water temp gauge back here as well. It's super hard for me to see any of them, but they're at least in here so I can see what's going on. So I've since like warranted the Holley Pro Dash, trying to sell it. If you want to buy a Holley Pro Dash standalone with a brand new wiring harness, literally they just sent me a brand new one. So I've got a brand new one in the box. Like, let me know. It's on Facebook Marketplace. You can probably dig it up. Just, I want it gone. I want to buy a Fuel Tech for this car, a Fuel Tech FT450, which we'll get into. Like, we can talk about some future plans for the new engine and stuff eventually, but we're going to run the Bridgie 12A for now. So I'll quit yapping and show you my next rotary Colt swap problems here. So I have ginormousized the trans tunnel. So the transmission, it's all mounted. Everything's solid mounted. I thought about doing bushings, decided against it. So the tunnel is now like a solid 2 inches wider on this side. You can see down here, I've got a hole and a bunch of hammering that I did to clear the starter. So I'm going to go ahead and like just cut all of that out and build like a nice sheet metal box to go down there to go around the starter. I am going to have to bend my throttle pedal over or cut off some of this aluminum plate because whenever I floor it, it now hits the starter. So I got to deal with that. Shifter position is mint. If I run an SA shifter, it's going to kick it back a little bit. So the shifter will be back here. You know, an FC shifter is like straight up and down. It would actually be a whole, you know, hole back. I love my like normal style parking brake, hydraulic handbrake, so I don't want, you know, like a big stick up in here or anything. I just give me a nice SA shifter. We're probably going to break this transmission, in all honesty. So the SA transmissions, I've already broke 2 of them, or I guess maybe 3 of them. They don't like 9,000 RPM shifts. That's the easiest way to put it. So at some point, you break it shifting at 9,000 RPM, whether it's a 1-2, a 2-3, bend a shift fork, it locks you out, etc., etc. But that's what I've got in here. So because I think I have 3 more that I can break, so I've got spares. I wanted to do the RX-8 transmission in here, but it's going to require a serious edit of this tunnel, so I just opted to throw this in here for now. The engine and transmission being already affixed, the drive shaft, I went to Perfection Driveline down in Chandler, Indiana. They got my drive shafts, the backup drive shaft and an RX-7 drive shaft. We're going to make a new one for this car, proper length, dialed for where this engine is sitting currently. So what I got to do tonight is I got to measure for some sheet metal, and ideally I can get some sort of a straight line-ish in here that's tall enough that, you know, I can do some hammering and some editing, and then I've got to obviously kick it up at the front and get the front of this all sealed. I'm really hoping to not have to take my heater box out, but this next issue is probably going to require me to take the whole dash out of the car, so I'm not too fired up for that, because that's kind of, it's not really a pain, it's just the windshield's in the car, which makes dash work hard to do. So anyways, the clutch. This is a big problem for me. The clutch on the Colt was cable. Okay, so literally lever in here, pulls a cable, goes down. The clutch on an RX-7 is hydraulic. So we have to mount a hydraulic master cylinder somewhere. The issue that I've got is that if you look down here, this is the clutch pedal moving. And obviously I would want, you know, clutch pedal out. We're going to push the pedal in. It would push a push rod like right in this area here. You would think it would be mint. But on the other side of that spot is basically no available space for me to put a clutch master cylinder. So what I'm thinking is how this worked from the Colt is if you look up in here, right about where my finger's at, if you can actually see up there, you're going to see a little lever that moves in the opposite direction. So I think I may try to take that lever and put it on the bottom and build a bracket basically that instead of, you know, the clutch pedal being like my elbow and pivoting around my hand to then pull above the pivot, right? If I make the pivot go back down, just like the clutch pedal, now I've got like my 2 fingers here going like this as I push the clutch. So then I can put the master cylinder on the other side of the brake master, because there's just no room. Like I may, like the ultimate backup is to do like a reverse mount and put the master cylinder up under the dash somewhere. So that's also why, you know, the whole dash has to come out. Gotta love when your rally car door just shuts super crisp. So here's basically where you can see where this cable, you know, this is the cable. We'll just remove it. The clutch cable here. Right here is that hole where it came out. I'm thinking that, you know, this vicinity, or I guess it would actually be lower than that, because right here this is pulling up there, so I'd be pushing down here. So I'm thinking somewhere in this vicinity right here is going to be the clutch master cylinder chilling. You know, throttle cable can obviously kind of go wherever it needs to go. That's not a big deal. Actually, I can shorten it a bunch, and it just makes a little U-turn to go right here to then smash the old 50 DCOE. So you can see I had to do some serious clearancing of the firewall up here. I'm basically to the heater box, but this gives me ample room for the clutch slave cylinder and the Z-bar to work. So I could have pushed the engine further forward and that would have made it easier. But honestly, like where the engine's sitting right now, the distance between the fan and radiator is very close to an RX-7. I also measured off this opening here, and I've ordered the same radiator that I've got in the RX-7, which is a 1979 Champion, like 3-core super rad radiator. So it's a big boy radiator. I don't have overheating issues with Turbo 13B at the racetrack full rip. I have catch can issues, but not overheating issues. So This radiator will be mint. We'll put that in here. So now I can have one spare radiator for 2 cars, which is huge. Try to keep all my parts the same. In addition, I'm running out of SA oil coolers. I've only got one spare because whenever I blew that motor up, it threw a bunch of metal through it. So I'm going to run an FC oil cooler on here. I hope I can get, lovely, look at my trash can, but this bolt out, it's pretty much seized in there. It's good old steel into aluminum. But if you can imagine, FC oil cooler is going to sit up here in front of the radiator. But honestly, probably below this little valence thing. And then the radiator will sit right behind it. So that should be plenty of cooling for this whole setup. I hope. I literally never had overheating issues with the full bridge. And I drove the wheels off this thing. So one of the things that, you know, it's a video a long time ago on the channel and you could go dig it up, but I took my silver RX-7 to a drift event and literally like drifted on a 100-degree day, just went out and drifted with a clutch fan, a stock radiator, a stock oil cooler, this exact engine, never had any problems with it getting hot. Like it would see maybe 200 and then it would cool right back down to like 190, 185. So I'm hoping I can fit a clutch fan in here. I'm also hoping that the proximity to the radiator is close enough I can run a stock RX7 fan shroud or some modification of it therein. But effectively, I have a bunch of stuff to, you know, still do. The one thing that is a win though, transmission mount higher than the old one, so I can raise my exhaust up a little bit, which is a huge win. I'm not going to run the dual primary header because I actually have like a full exhaust that I built for a first gen that uses that header, and I would need to modify the header just a little bit. It hangs like 1.5 inches too low, and I can bring it up a little bit. So it's like I'm going to take the old truck header that y'all saw from like the hybrid video, and that's this, that, and the other, the really rusty one, and I'm going to cut that and we're going to kind of reconfigure it. So I should just be able to chop it and then slide it all up higher and re-weld it. If I got to do some finagling, then we'll do that. But basically, that's going to be the end of today's video, guys. So that's an update of where I'm at. Next week, Tuesday, get ready because this thing's going to be running. So I'm trying to, you know, pack as much crazy content as I can into each one of these videos, mainly because I have to get the car done for Over Mountain Rally. So basically, I've got 2 weeks to get this thing done, and I am very confident this engine's going to just fire right up. The carburetor, as y'all have seen this car, the longtime subscribers, thank you, have seen this thing rip in my first gen before I built the red one. So, you know, this engine rips. It sounds sick. We should be good. It's just been sitting under my workbench on a little rolly cart. But just some wiring things, alternator, add another coil, oil cooler lines. I mean, basically everything. We're rebuilding the whole car. So aside from like fuel system mint for Weber's because it was set up for the Mikuni, and I'm going to actually take these gauges and put them in the dash instead of, you know, going to something crazy. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't seen the video that blew up the Colt and we won the Ken Block Flat Out Forever Award at this last rally, go check that video out, guys. I would love and appreciate it if you guys watched that. That was such a cool video. I'm so pumped, and it's kind of a different style of video than what we normally film or a shot video like this. So go check that out. If you're new to the channel, thank you guys very much for subscribing. The Rotary Colt, we will make it. It's going to sound sick, and I cannot wait to have this thing done. So peace, keep it rad, live a life you don't need a vacation from. It's the whole reason we wear Hawaiian shirts. We're constantly on vacation. So I'm going to, I guess, mock up some sheet metal so I can take it to the sheet metal guy to bend it on his nice brake tomorrow. And then, yeah, the work is never ending. Peace, guys. Oh, yeah, and thank you guys for watching. Huge. Thank you guys for watching. And without the Patreon, none of this would be possible. Go check out the Patreon if you're interested. Peace, guys.